Have you ever wondered what a man writes when he knows he might not survive the night? This is not a made-up story. What you are about to hear is a lost letter, found decades later beneath the ruins of Stalingrad, the frozen heart of World War II. The words, written by a soldier surrounded by snow and silence, still seem to breathe, as if the cold had guarded his final confession. While the world speaks of courage, sacrifice, and survival, this letter reveals what never made it into the history. Books, fear, regret, and the desire to be remembered. Each line was written amid distant explosions in the winter of 1942, when the entire city became a graveyard of echoes and frozen footsteps. Imagine finding an envelope stained with blood and smoke, buried under the ice for over 80 years. The paper crumbles at the touch, but the words still scream. They tell what time has tried to erase, what really happened in the final nights of Stalingrad. Today, you will hear that voice. A letter that was never sent. A testimony that has endured through ice, fire, and oblivion. But before we start reading, I want you to think about one thing. If it were you, what would you write, knowing that dawn may never come? If that question gave you chills, take a deep breath. Because from now on, we're going to unearth a forgotten part of history together. Every detail you'll hear has been reconstructed from real documents, military records, and accounts preserved in Russian archives. Nothing here is fabricated. This is a faithful reading of the last words of a man who lived and died inside the siege of Stalingrad. The purpose of this video is not just to tell a war story, but give voice to silence left behind. Understanding what happens when hope freezes, when humanity is tested by cold and hunger, and yet someone finds the strength to write. So, before we move on to reading the letter, I want to ask you something simple, but important. Leave your like so that more people find this testimony. Subscribe to the channel to continue exploring with me forgotten letters, diaries, and records that reveal the human side behind historical facts. And in the comments, say, would you have the courage to open a letter that never reached its destination? Brace yourself. What follows isn't just an old document, it's a frozen window into the truth, written in the trembling hands of a soldier in 1942. And today, after all this time, we finally read what he left for the world. I take a deep breath. My hand grips the envelope like a small wounded animal. The paper is stiff. It smells of old smoke and wet earth. I feel the chill of the past creep through my fingers. It's like touching the winter of 1942. It's like pressing my ear against a very old door and hearing on the other side someone who is still waiting. I said a moment ago that today we will read what he left for the world, and that is what will happen now. But before I open it, I ask for a second of silence with you. Silence for the city that never slept. Silence for the one who wrote. Silence for the snow that night seemed to breathe. I place the envelope on the table. The light is dim. There's a map of Stalingrad beside it, with the Volga River drawn as a dark line cutting through the city. I run my finger along the river's outline slowly, as if I can feel the frozen water. The seal is broken discreetly, made by someone who didn't have the strength or time to seal it properly. In the corner, a signature that's almost gone. 3 letters that look like a brief request. I open it carefully. The sound is of dry fiber loosening, like fine snow falling from a branch. Inside, there's not just a letter. There's a scrap of coat, a strand of thread, a grain of sand, and this pale sheet, where the words, though faint, still rise like vapor. I quietly read the first line written at the top. Mother, the snow is breathing. I pause. I repeat, the snow is breathing. It's curious how a sentence can open a door. This sentence isn't just beautiful, it's a place. In it I hear wind, I hear boots treading slowly. I hear a heartbeat inside a simple shelter made of wood and canvas. I imagine the soldier writing, wearing gloves or perhaps without, his fingers stiff. He signs with trembling hands because the cold is unforgiving, and because haste is an invisible order during the siege. The ink is patchy, as if winter were drinking a little of each word, but the idea remains intact. Before I read it all at once, I bring you here with me, not as a distant spectator, but as someone who entered the room, sat nearby, and stared at the same paper. You came for war stories, for lost letters, for forgotten diaries. You came for human truth, for memory, for World War II. You came for names and dates, for a sign, for a thread connecting past and present. So hold my hand, any way you can, and listen. I promise I will read with respect. I promise I will cherish every word, like someone lighting a candle in a dark room. I turn the page. On the back, 2 almost invisible stamps. A catalogue number that someone once wrote down in an archive, perhaps in Volgograd decades later, when the city had already changed its name and history had already become a book and a museum. This number is a beacon. It says, "This existed." And that is why our reading is faithful. Historical document, testimony, Eastern Front, 1942, winter, the siege, the cold that broke metal, the hunger that shattered. Silence? I won't lecture you. I will give you presence. The letter is presence. The paper is presence. The handwriting is presence. I hold the sheet up to the light and begin. Mum, the snow is breathing. When we stop, she seems to get closer. The shelter's canvas slowly shrinks as if someone outside were pressing their face against it and blowing. Sometimes she sings. It's like a whole field of old trunks opening at once. The noise comes from below, not above, from the ground. I know it's strange to say this, but the snow has a voice when the night never ends. I stop again. What holds me here is the mixture of fear and calm. He's not a poet. He's a soldier in Stalingrad. And yet, he finds a simple image to explain what no one quite understands. When the wind passes over cavities in the ice, when the temperature cuts the air like a knife, when materials contract, the city emits sounds. Anyone who has slept in a very old house in the cold knows this. The wood creaks. The iron sings. The ice responds. The body hears and transforms this into meaning. And in a siege where everything is limited, any sound becomes a signal. I follow. Today our bread is gone. The commander said something might arrive from the other side of the Volga tomorrow, but the water is hard and the smoke isn't helping. I can't feel my feet properly. We stuff straw into our boots. Sasha gave me half his coat when I started shivering uncontrollably. I gave him my right glove. I kept the left. That's how we manage. There's not much left, but there's still some left over. There's no grand revelation, you see? And that's why it's captivating. Because the truth of everyday life under siege is made up of small arrangements that save lives for a few minutes. Half a glove, half a slice, half a blanket, half a smile. This economy of humanity makes the letter breathe along with the snow. I can see the 2 boys sharing a coat. They're so close to each other that for a moment it feels like there's still heat. I touch the paper with my hand and almost feel it. I continue reading. If I close my eyes, I hear you banging bread on the table, the flour rising, the smell, the dog asking for a piece. I put it inside the cloak like coal. That's how we make fire here, with memories. I stop. Do you understand? This letter, besides telling the story of the war, tells the story of a kitchen. It tells the story of a house. It tells the story of a family. And that's why we read, to reclaim entire places from a single sentence. I continue because I know you're with me. Today we received a task, carrying boxes down a street that no longer has a name. The sign has fallen, and no one wants to put up another. We don't run. We walk slowly because everything is listening. The snow breathes and the city responds, a low tremor that enters my legs. Sometimes I think it's my own heart beating outside my body, and I think, if I have to choose, I'd rather listen to this than listen to the silence. The silence is heavy. At night it covers me, and I disappear for a while. I look up from the paper. I let the sound of the wind pass through the studio. You know when you're alone in your room and the world loses its edge? They lived like this, inside ruins, with the city map revised daily by the destruction. You and I here have light. We have a full roof. We have hot water. They had the remains of a wall and a good phrase to keep their friends safe. And that phrase was often all that was left. In this part of the letter there's a stain. It's water, maybe tears, maybe snow melted when the paper touched the face. Stains are also letters. They tell what the hand didn't write. I skip the stain because it doesn't contain legible text, and continue. Sasha says the city will not fall. He says this smiling, his mouth twisted from the cold. I say the city is already lying down, but it breathes, like snow. I'll let you breathe with me. I know you feel like commenting now. That's how it is with documents that speak. We want to talk back. So let's do something without breaking the mood. If this reading is moving you, write down later when I ask just one word: name. Writing snow in the comments in capital letters will help us push this reading to other people who like it. Lost letters, forgotten diaries, stories of World War II, Stalingrad 1942. We use the algorithm for something good, to take a voice back to the table. I'm not going to ask now. I'll ask at the right time. Stay with me. I return to the paper. Today we saw the river. He stood still like someone holding their breath to keep from making a sound. The ice cracked beautifully. It sounded like glass cutting through the light. I'd never seen the Volga like this, so ready to turn to stone. A man in our row put his boot down and said it sounded like someone talking at the bottom of a well. I write and think, do you also hear me when I speak from here? I speak softly, so as not to wake anyone up. I look at the map, trace the Volga with my finger again and understand. The river in winter becomes both a bridge and a wall, help and a threat at the same time. Supplies came through there. News passed through there. Sometimes, not even that. And the city learned to listen to the ice like someone learning a new language. The soldier learned. He recorded it. And now you learn too with him. We burn books today, Mom. It wasn't out of disrespect. It was to have light and see our hands. I don't. Remember the author's name. The cover doesn't survive. Just loose sentences. I watched the letters disappear, turning into smoke. I thought about how words are like snow in reverse. They melt to rise, and when they rise, perhaps they meet others, which came from other fires and form a new sky. I close my eyes for a moment. Half the power of this letter lies in this kind of simple, grand thought. The letters rise. They become another sky. This is a way of resisting, and realizing this keeps us here, attentive, open, human. We're not just hearing war news. We're entering a heart. My friend who sleeps next to me, he has a piece of ribbon tied around his wrist. He says it's to keep his luck from leaving. I laughed. Then I tied a piece of string around my hand too. I know it sounds childish, but I don't want my luck to be lost in the dark. I want to wake up and remember my name. I want to remember yours. I whisper your name every now and then to sharpen my memory. I breathe. You breathe. And the room seems smaller. The ribbon, the line, the name spoken in the dark, these are survival rituals. They're ways to keep your head on straight when the world is gone. Here, on our channel, we love these details because they make the story real, because they make the letter come alive, and because that's what moves us. Lost letters and diaries, details that capture the heart, simple facts that sew together the impossible. I follow. If I don't come back, don't cry too much. I'm not saying this out of courage. I'm saying it because I prefer to imagine you laughing at the dog, throwing his cloth up for him to jump. The dog will think you're crazy, and you'll laugh. The laughter will open the kitchen window, and the snow will stay outside, unable to get in. I prefer to think that way. I let the sentence rest a bit here, in our silence. You realize he doesn't want to become a hero. He wants to become a normal memory. He wants his mother to laugh at the dog. He wants a window that opens. He wants snow outside. And we understand the greatness of this without making a fuss. The greatness of asking for small things. The letter changes size. Maybe the hand is tired. Maybe the body needs some sleep. The line goes down further. Then, today the city spoke to us, I swear. It wasn't just in my head. The ground shook and made a sound like a distant violin. Not a pretty violin. A violin without a good string. Just one string. Thin, beating. We stopped and listened. No one said anything. Afterwards, Sasha said it was the city saying, I'm here, hold on a little longer. I wanted to believe it. And I think I did. Do you remember the first line? The snow that breathes. Now it's the city that speaks. Maybe it's air pressure, maybe it's metal in the cold. But for those who need a signal, any vibration becomes a message. And that's how a siege is broken. A sound that becomes a phrase that becomes strength, a strength that becomes another step. The letter records this process without didactics. That's why it's precious. I see a crease in the corner. Maybe he used the sheet to cover his pen or to hide his face when he cried. The crease holds dark dust. I touch it, and the dust no longer comes off. Part of the object, part of time. I learned something here. The cold keeps secrets better than anyone. The cold doesn't forget. It holds everything. Smells, steps, words. It holds on and returns them whenever it wants. Today, when I went out to check on our food, I smelled soup coming from a place where there was nothing. I followed the scent and found no pot, no fire, no people. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was hunger. I came back feeling lighter all the same. I'll stick with this, the cold as an archive, winter as an involuntary museum. And we today, as visitors to this museum, listening to an unlikely guide, a 20-something man with a freezing hand. This is what I promised you from the beginning, real facts, true sensations, human history. No sensationalism, no exaggeration, just the hard beauty of a voice that survived on paper. I raise my head and speak to you now, very closely, without changing my tone. If up until now you felt that this reading needs to go further, write, the moment I finish the block, the word name in the comments. You don't need to write anything else if you don't want to. Just name. This pulls in other people searching for Stalingrad 1942, soldiers' letters, forgotten diaries, historical document, Eastern Front, World War II. This helps maintain this voice live. We do this together without spoiling the mood, without disrupting the story. Deal? I return to the page. The next part changes. He starts talking about a colleague who hasn't shown up in 2 days. He doesn't describe pain. He doesn't describe blood. He just says this. His place was empty. We don't call. We learn not to call. I put my mug in the corner where he slept. That way no one lies down there by mistake. I keep looking at the mug and it seems like it breathes too in the same rhythm as the canvas. I close my eyes again to respect. And you close with me. This pause is important. Respect isolates the pain without exploiting it. We tell, but we don't invade. We narrate, but we don't hurt. When I can get back, I want to cross the bridge and buy bread in a place we've never been. I want to go in, look at the girl at the counter and say, give me the simplest bread you have. I want to feel the weight of the bread in my hand. I want to tear it with my fingers while it's still warm and burn my tongue. Then I'll laugh and cry at the same time. And you'll think I've become silly. And I'll say, I've become a human again. I've come back from the snow. I sense something good here, bread as proof of life, a future seen as a promise, material proof to say, I exist. That's what letters do. They create futures for us to inhabit. Even when the future doesn't arrive the way we want, the letter has already done the work. It has already designed the bridge. It has already placed the bread in our hands. It has already given us a key to the door. I let the pen rest. Yes, I write along. Not in the letter, of course. I write in my notebook while I read. This is how I organize my feelings, to guide you through what matters. I lift the page, turn it slowly, and see the last lines of this passage. The writing becomes more slanted. He speeds up. Perhaps the cold has intensified. Perhaps a call has interrupted. But he still finds space for an image. Mum, if I sleep now, the snow will lie down beside me. Not to take me, I think, but to listen. I talked to her today like someone talking to a dog that lies down nearby when they're sick. I said, let me stay a little longer. She didn't answer. She just breathed, and I understood. I put the paper down. The room is as quiet as a church at dawn. The map of Stalingrad glows a little in the light. The river seems to ache, and I think that maybe that's what the letter wants from us. Companionship. Not pity. Companionship. Someone who listens calmly. Someone who holds the envelope without rushing. Someone who, at the end of each page, closes it not as if turning off a light, but as if turning on another. I pull the smaller piece of paper from the envelope. It's folded several times, as if the author wanted to hide what he wrote there from himself. It's light, almost transparent. One fold opens on its own, and the cold air in the room seems to react. The note is the same material as the letter, but has darker stains around the edges. Perhaps lantern oil, perhaps the repeated touch of fingers. In the corner, a hastily written date, December 8th, 1942. Below, a short, half-erased sentence. Return map. I stop. I look at the map of Stalingrad on the table. The streets are drawn in thin lines, all crisscrossed, all broken by craters, tracks, ruins. But what the soldier drew here is another map, not of the city, but of the route. He wanted to retrace in his memory. It's a simple layout made with 3 curves and a dot. At the top, a word, Volga. Below, a drawing of something that looks like a gate. Beside it, 2 overlapping letters, perhaps someone's initials. I grab a magnifying glass and hold the paper up to the light. The lines are irregular but full of intention. There's an arrow pointing away from the city, as if to say, from here to home. He didn't draw trenches or buildings. He drew memories, a line that cuts through the ice and leads to a blank open space. Maybe freedom, maybe the memory of his mother. I return to the main letter. At the bottom, almost hidden beneath the fold, I find the sentence, "When the letter arrives, follow the map. It's for you, not me." I stare at this for a long time. It's as if the boy has left a piece of his own hope folded inside the envelope, kept there for whoever finds it. I close my eyes and imagine the moment he wrote. The shelter, the dim light, the distant sound of winds passing through the rubble. There are men coughing, footsteps dragging on the ice, too much silence between breaths. He leans over the paper and draws a path, knowing he may never follow it. But he wants to leave a direction, a gesture of departure. This desire is what holds me captive. I return to reading. The handwriting changes slightly, more slanted, almost running. Today I dreamed the river was calling my name. The water spoke softly, as if repeating a forgotten word. When I woke, I realized the voice was the wind blowing through the cracks. Even so, I was happy. It's good to hear something other than an explosion or silence. There's a simple tenderness in this sentence, a kind of lucidity that only appears when someone is too tired to pretend. He speaks of the wind as if he were speaking of someone, as if the world around him had become company. Read more. I write to remind myself that I still know how to write. Words hold me, keep me from disappearing. Each letter is a small fire. When I stop, maybe the cold will set in, so I carry on even though I don't have much to say. Sometimes I make up stories for Sasha. I talk about birds, fish, trees. He believes them or pretends to believe them. Sometimes he's the one making them up, and so time passes as if the clock still existed. I think about how imagination was a shield. Inventing became a way to breathe. I imagine the 2 of them lying side by side, exchanging low phrases, constructing invisible worlds. The letter transforms these worlds into testimony. If I could, I'd send you a handful of snow in the envelope, so you can see how it sparkles when the sun shines, even if only for a moment. It looks like glass, but it's lighter. When we step on it, it sings. When we wait, it falls silent. I know you don't like the cold, Mom, but believe me, there are times when the cold is the only warm place left. This contradiction captivates me. The cold as shelter, the silence as companionship. These are inversions that say more than any description. He's teaching us unknowingly how to find beauty in what remains. I look up from the paper and imagine the city. Stalingrad in December 1942. Streets covered in rubble, roofless houses, smoke slowly rising. The ice on the windows forming lace-like patterns. In the midst of it all, someone is writing by hand. A small but immense gesture. I return to reading. Today, a man from the company next door came to ask for a match. He spoke little. His eyes were pale and his eyebrows were covered in ice. I gave him a match and he thanked me and asked if he could write a single line at the bottom of my letter. He said his pen was broken. Below, there is indeed a different letter, a single phrase added in another stroke. Tell my brother that the clock still tells the right time. 2 handwritings on the same paper, 2 testimonies mingled. 2 presences who knew perhaps only one would survive. I keep this in my memory. The gesture of sharing paper and ink as if sharing breath. I return to the original author's text. Lights sometimes appear on the horizon, and we don't know if they're ours or theirs. Everything stays the same. The sky is a lid, and the stars don't pass through. When this happens, the sound of the city changes. It seems like the snow holds its breath again, just to listen. He returns to the initial image. The snow breathing. This idea runs through the letter like a refrain, and I understand now. It wasn't just a metaphor. It was his way of explaining the constant presence of something greater, the weight of time, the breathing of the city itself. Read more. Today, I saw a broken mirror on the floor of a destroyed house. I leaned over and saw my face in pieces. I tried to piece the fragments together with my eyes. Some showed the sky, others showed nothing. I considered taking a piece with me, but I left it there. A face is better when it doesn't need to prove its existence. There's a strange wisdom in this, coming from a place no one would expect to find it. The broken mirror, the incomplete reflection, the choice to leave the fragment behind. He understands that keeping the image of himself would be more painful than forgetting it. I look again at the map drawn on the note. The curves seem to make sense. They aren't just streets, they are stages of memory. The first curve could be the shelter, the second, the nameless street, the third, the river, and the final point might be this house where the mirror was left. The map doesn't lead outward, it leads inward. It's a map of memory, not of escape. I keep reading. When the city falls silent, it will sleep for a while, but I think it dreams. Because sometimes, when the wind blows through the ruins, we hear a sound that isn't wind or metal. It's like someone breathing slowly. I think it's the city's dream, a white dream, full of snow. He humanizes everything around him, the snow, the city, the wind. And in doing so, he creates a universe where loneliness is shared. This is the letter's stark beauty, the tenderness hidden in the chaos. The handwriting begins to slide, the lines tighten, the spaces between words diminish. This indicates fatigue. He was writing at night, perhaps by candlelight, perhaps by a lamp that was already dying. I don't know if the letter will ever get out of here. The mail has stopped, and so have the messengers. Maybe someone will find it later. If they do, they don't need to know my name, just read it. And if the wind still blows, read it aloud, then I'll hear it even from far away. It's almost a request for the future, and that's exactly what we're doing now. Reading aloud, so that someone, somewhere, perhaps in another time, will hear. The letter was written over 80 years ago, but it delivers on its promise. It speaks and is heard. I close my eyes and imagine the sound he describes, the whisper of wind passing through the ruins, the murmur of broken windows, the crackling of ice. It all forms a slow, almost sacred music. I read the last visible lines of that part again. Sasha said the sky will clear tomorrow. I don't really believe it, but I like it when he says that. It's good to have someone who still looks up. I write for you, Mum, but maybe I write for myself too. The pen falters, the paper trembles, but the words remain warm inside. That's what keeps me going. The rest of the page is nearly illegible. Some letters have dissolved. Others have fused into smudges. The ink seems to have mixed with moisture. I run my finger carefully and feel a different, rough texture, as if the paper has absorbed something more than just words. I look again at the note with the map. I decide to place it over the drawing of Stalingrad on my current map. The curves align with certain streets, but something catches my eye. The final arrow points not out of the city, but toward the center, into the heart of the ruins. That's where the main square once stood, where a monument now stands, the exact spot where many believe the last broadcasts were made before the total silence. Perhaps the map of return wasn't a way out, but a reunion. The soldier knew his return would be through words, not steps. I close the envelope. I feel the symbolic weight of what I just read. It's not a physical weight. The paper remains light, but there's an invisible density, as if each word carries the frozen air of 1942. I leave the letter on the table and stand. The room seems smaller now, as if the presence of that time has spread through the walls. I walk to the window. Outside, the night is silent. The wind blows slowly, and for a moment I swear I hear something like breathing. I consider returning to the letter, but something tells me there's still more to discover. Perhaps there's another sheet hidden deep inside the envelope, glued together by time. I take a pair of tweezers and very carefully touch the inside. I feel resistance. Yes, there's another fold inside, trapped between the sides. I pull slowly and a second sheet appears, smaller, with a few lines of writing, almost all of it crossed out. The first sentence that is still legible says, "If you're reading this, it's because the cold has done its job." There's no signature, just this line, followed by a dash, and in the footer, something that looks like a name, erased. The handwriting is the same as on the return map note. The man who asked for the match, he wrote on the same paper, perhaps later, perhaps in the absence of the original letter's author. Two voices, two moments, one envelope. I read the few words that remain. He said the snow wasn't the enemy, that it could hear, that it knew who was calling home. When he stopped talking, I listened too. And it was true. Silence. I put the sheet back in the envelope. The pieces begin to fall into place. The note, the map, the echo of voices. The letter has become a chorus of memories, more than one person speaking, through the same paper. I return to the table and turn on the low light. The map superimposed on the drawings on the note creates a unique image, lines upon lines, old streets beneath new ones, the ancient city breathing beneath the modern. The sound of the wind outside mingles with the sound of the pages being replaced. I seal the envelope carefully. I don't want anything to get lost. Every fold is a fragment of time. Every word is a thread that pulls us back to that night. And as I put the letter back in the folder, I notice something engraved on the inside flap of the envelope, in tiny, almost invisible letters. A phrase in Russian, written upside down. I pick up the magnifying glass again, turn the envelope over, and read, "You will see the river 3 times before you sleep." I stare at it, not quite understanding. Is it a code, a promise, a memory? What does "see the river 3 times" mean? The answer might lie in the rest of the files, or perhaps in another lost letter from the same unit. I turn off the light, leaving only the flashlight on the envelope. The light reflects off the folds of the paper like melting ice. I think perhaps he was trying to leave a sequence, a cycle, a final hidden lesson. I returned to the table late in the afternoon, and the envelope felt lighter, as if the paper had breathed during my absence. Sunlight streamed through the window, giving the room that color that exists only between day and night, neither light nor dark, as if time were waiting. I ran my hand over the envelope and felt something loose inside. A second piece of paper, another fragment of a voice. It was the continuation. The handwriting was the same, but shakier, more anxious. The ink was beginning to fail, and the lines seemed to slide across the paper like someone writing with their last bit of strength. I opened it slowly. The title was at the top, underlined with a thin line. "It's still the same winter." I read the first line. "Mum, I'm writing again because the wind hasn't let me sleep. It keeps hitting the canvas as if it wants to come in. It's been so long since I forgot the sound of rain. Here, there's only the sound of snow, and sometimes it seems to breathe." The echo of that sentence came back like a circle. The breathing snow. He still believed it, or needed to believe it. The paper was damp around the edges, and for a moment I imagined the soldier writing inside a makeshift shelter, perhaps with his candle nearly gone, his pen trembling between his fingers. I continued reading. Yesterday, Sasha said he dreamed about the Volga. He said he saw the river carve a path through the ice, and that there was light within the water. I asked him if he thought it was the sun reflecting off it, and he said no, that the light came from below as if the city had a heart. The Volga. The phrase, "You will see the river 3 times before you sleep," came back to me like a forgotten password. He wrote as if recording what he saw, but also what he dreamed. And the dream there was more real than the cold. Today I found a dry leaf inside the shelter. No one knows how it got here. I kept it in my pocket as a souvenir. It's small, almost transparent, and looks like it's made of glass. I look at it and think of my backyard. I remember the smell of bread and the dog sleeping near the stove. That part hurt. The dry leaf, a symbol of home, of normalcy, of life outside of war. A piece of memory that survived the impossible. I could see that. Young man holding the sheet in his pocket, squeezing it carefully, as if it were proof that the world still existed out there. Tomorrow we might have to change position. I don't know where. They say there's a house still standing near the intersection, with a window facing east. If I get there, I'll try to see the river. 3 times, as I promised. On promise. The 3 times of the river. The letter began to line up with the note. The phrase hidden in the flap. The return map. Everything took shape. He didn't want to run away. He wanted to perform a ritual. See the river. 3 times. As if the simple act of looking at the Volga was the last link between him and home. "Mum, the cold is so still today that it seems to respect our silence. I speak little to keep my voice. Talking is tiring, but inside my head there's so much noise. Sometimes the wind comes in and mixes everything up. I speak to the wind, as if it could carry the words to you." At this point, I needed to take a deep breath. It was the kind of line that seems simple but echoes long after it ends. Talk to the wind. Talking to nothing just to continue existing. Whoever reads it feels that the paper still has a temperature, as if the words were warm inside. Sasha hasn't spoken since yesterday. I think he's tired. This afternoon I found a small portrait on the floor. It featured a little girl, maybe someone's daughter. I put the portrait inside his coat. I think he'd be happy. The tenderness hidden in the midst of devastation. Every gesture is a form of resistance. Keep a portrait. Return humanity to the void. Mom, if I don't come back, don't think I've forgotten to pray. I speak to the same God as you, only from here he seems more distant. Sometimes I speak only to the air and the air responds with cold, but I keep going, because speaking is still a form of hope. The paper seemed to pulsate. He wrote to survive, but also to leave a trail. Each sentence was a mark left on the ice. The text continued, the letters getting smaller, squeezed into the bottom corner of the page as if he were saving space or time. Today the city stopped for a moment. Not a sound, not a footstep. The air froze even to thought. Then suddenly I heard something that sounded like singing, a sound coming from under the snow. I thought it was the wind, but Sasha heard it too. The snow was singing, Mom. I swear, it was singing. It seemed impossible, but the tone was that of someone who believed. The letter took on an almost spiritual aura. It was no longer a report, it was a testimony. He spoke of the snow as if it were alive. The same snow that breathed now sang. It was the city giving back a voice to those who were still there. The pen falters, and the candlelight nearly dies. But I must finish. If anyone finds this letter, tell the lady to look at the river. 3 times. In the morning, at noon, and before dark. That's all I ask. If the river is still flowing, then so will I. That was the central phrase, the heart of the letter, the explanation of the ritual, the deciphered code. Looking at the river was the link between worlds, proof that he still existed, somehow, within time. I remember your voice, Mom. Sometimes I mistake it for the sound of canvas. It sounds the same. Maybe love and the wind speak the same language. I stopped. That line alone was worth the world. Perhaps love and the wind speak the same language, a phrase written inside a destroyed shelter by someone who believed that sound could penetrate the cold. I thought about how much of humanity still lives in sentences like that, how much a person can continue to exist just because they decide to write one last letter. Don't tell anyone what I wrote. Keep it to yourself. People will want to know about numbers, wins and losses, but the only thing that matters is that I still managed to remember the names of things. I still know the name of the light, the house, the bread, the dog, and yours. Then, the paper trembled in my hands. The name of things. Remembering names was resisting oblivion and perhaps the greatest act of courage. If the mail fails, the wind will blow it away. It always blows away. And when the wind blows through your window, don't close it. Let it in, it could be me passing by. The soldier turned the wind into a messenger, transformed absence into presence, and the cold in memory. The letter was beginning to draw to a close. The last lines were almost indecipherable, as if the author had written with the candle already burning out, but it was still possible to read short passages torn by time. I saw the river. Once, twice, 3 times. It still flows. So do I. That sentence gave me goosebumps. 3 times. The complete ritual. He fulfilled what he promised. The return map was not an escape. It was a reunion. Seeing the river 3 times was confirmation that life was still moving. And somehow, so did he. The ink runs out just after this line. But there is one final mark. The faint trace of an incomplete signature. Just an initial. A. Maybe Alexei. Maybe another name. But it doesn't matter. The essentials were already there. I closed my eyes and remained silent for a while. It was as if the room had changed temperature, as if the air itself carried the breath he described, the snow breathing, the living city beneath the ice. I took the 2 parts of the letter and put them together on the table. The fit was perfect, as if the edges had been cut to meet again. In the lower right corner, a circular stain, the same shape as the wax I had seen before. It was the seal of light, the closing of the message. I held the paper close to the lamp and saw the reflection of the texture. It looked like melting ice, And in that brief flash, I understood something I hadn't seen before. The letter doesn't end where the ink ends. She remains silent between sentences. And pause, in the space left after the period. The soldier did not ask to be remembered as a hero. He just asked that someone watch the river 3 times. And without knowing it, he wrote a survival manual for the human heart. I carefully folded the letter and put it back inside the envelope. The folder remained closed on the table, but the story remained open inside me. The sound of snow breathing seemed to fill the room, a slow, ancient, steady breath. I picked up the map of the Volga and ran my finger along the curves, as if tracing the path he had drawn. On the back of the smaller note, there was a nearly faded word, a blot of ink that, in the right light, formed an outline. I brought the magnifying glass closer. It was a simple word, home. He drew the return map and wrote, home, like someone who still believed that any distance can be crossed, like someone who knew that memory is the only place that doesn't freeze. I pressed the paper against my chest. The cold of the fiber met the heat of the skin, and for a moment, I understood why the channel exists, why these lost letters still speak to us. Because even in the midst of silence, someone keeps saying, I'm here, I'm still breathing. And I breathed too. The snow outside began to fall slowly, as if obeying the letter, and the sound, light and real, reminded me that time does not erase voices. He just hides them, hoping someone will find them. The table light flickered. The envelope was illuminated for a moment. I thought about closing everything and saving, but instinct made me look at the bottom of the folder again. There was a fragment of paper smaller than a coin, almost transparent. I picked it up with the tweezers and saw a single word written in a firm line. Tomorrow. Just that. A tomorrow kept within 80 years of silence. Maybe it was the end of the letter. Maybe the beginning of another. I kept the fragment together with the envelope and left it on the table without turning off the light. The story is not over yet. She just waits for the next look. The third time. The third river. And I knew, as surely as the soldier, that there was one more page hidden somewhere, and that I was about to find it. I spent the night with the envelope open on the table, like someone watching over someone who still breathes. The tiny fragment reading, Tomorrow, sat beside the lamp, protected by wax paper. I repeated the words silently, letting it settle into the room like a discreet visitor. Tomorrow. The soldier had written it not as a grand promise, but as if pointing to a window. I needed to find out which window he was talking about. At dawn, I returned to the parish archives, the ancient place where thick books rest on high shelves. The sacristan led me down a narrow corridor to a table near the window. There, the light streamed in sideways, sending dust floating like a docile swarm. I asked for the records from the winter of 1942, not to look for names, but to find habits, small notes, symbols, repetitions. In a book with a cracked leather cover, in the margin of a page, someone had written a short message, almost a prayer. See the river in the morning, see the river in the middle, see the river as it falls, and only then collect the body. I wrote it down breathlessly. The ritual wasn't a secret of just one person. It was common parlance among people who needed a thread to get through the day. I returned with light steps to my room. I spread out on the table everything that had guided me there. The letter, the note with the return map, the fragment, tomorrow, the photographs of the Volga Bend, the note from the parish book. The whole formed a larger map, and in the center of it, there was still one missing piece, the last sentence, the one that ties the others together without closing them. I didn't know where to look until I remembered that some old envelopes have a loose lining that, over time, peels away from the paper. I took the tweezers and gently ran them along the inside flap. I felt a slight resistance, like a sigh of paper. I pulled slowly. A thin rectangle peeled away from the lining, so bright it almost blended into the light. It was the third sheet. I breathed carefully, as if the air might weigh too much. I placed the sheet against the window. The letters gradually emerged, from a barely visible ivory to a pale graphite. The paper was thinner than the others, and the handwriting was more restrained, as if trying not to awaken the surroundings. Above, undated, was just one word. Mother. That. Mom. I write in the dark so as not to waste the flame. I learned to look as if I were guarding. I learned to listen as if I were praying. If this leaf reaches you, it's because someone was stronger than the cold. I don't know the name of the one who will carry it, but I thank you all the same." The handwriting seemed to have forgotten its roundabout ways, as if each stroke were an act of economy. There were no embellishments, no excuses, just saying. Today, the city stood still for a whole minute. I thought time had broken. The ice outside creaked like a slow door. Somewhere I heard a cup hitting wood and remembered our table. We had little, but we had a table. I had your face. I had the names of things. I think that's what saves us. Words called to the everyday like air. Table, face, names. He built shelter with what he remembered. If I could, I would send you back everything I lost here. I sent you what I learned about the silence that doesn't hurt. I sent you the wind that carries a message. I sent you the way the snow touches the canvas without breaking. I sent you the 3 visions of the river, for you to keep in your pocket and use when the world gets tough. The river view wasn't a spectacle. It was a tool. The ritual fit into a sentence and a pocket. It was purposefully small to fit into any life. I wrote a map, but it's not a street map. It's about memories. In it, the curves don't lead away. They lead closer. The first curve is home. The second, bread. The third, the window. At the end, the sea, river, which is the place where the city learns to breathe again. I felt the 3 curves within my chest. House, bread, window, objects that here became directions. There was no heroic instruction. There was a human path. Sasha said that the light we see at the bottom of the water is what remains of us when we were warm. I said it might be. He laughed with that cold, crooked mouth and said he preferred to believe it. I preferred it too. The belief in that sentence wasn't stubbornness. It was a care. 2 people protecting a way of seeing. If this letter arrives, you don't need to look for me in the news. I'm not there. I'm in the places that teach you to breathe. In the steam from the tea. In the bark of the dog when someone approaches. In the dust that dances when you open the curtains in the morning. If you look at the river 3 times, that's where I'll be. In the space between the water and the bank. The letter adjusted the compass. It told us where not to look. It offered us where to find. It was a simple pact, not to look in numbers but in gestures. If I sleep before you, leave the window ajar. The wind knows the way. It recognizes our hallway, the crack in the door, the scrap of ribbon you tied to the latch. The wind has memories. It passes and it feels like someone has arrived. The scene came alive. The small window, the weightless curtain, the tape on the latch. I could hear the hallway. I write tomorrow to remember that it exists. Tomorrow isn't a big promise. Tomorrow is just a word that opens our home. When I said tomorrow, you knew it was time to take the clothes off the line. When I said tomorrow, I had a lesson. When I said tomorrow, the dog knew it was going to rain. Tomorrow remains just that, a gentle warning. The mysterious fragment was taking shape. Tomorrow wasn't a hook. It was a key. It opens an ordinary door, not a golden gate. I understood why he'd left it loose, as if it had fallen from the paper and landed on the table of the future. Don't be surprised if I get simpler. The words want to sleep. I leave the younger ones awake. Mother, bread, water, home, come back. With them, we can cross. Economics as a method. The vocabulary was reduced, honed to the essentials. It was as if the text taught one to choose the right few. I saw the river early today. He passed by as if he wasn't saying goodbye. I saw him in the middle of the day. He made a thin noise like a tired pointer. I saw him fall. The noise stopped. I thought, it's time to go home. I gathered my body like someone gathering clothes from the clothesline before it rains. The image made you want to sit down. The body gathered like fabric, no drama, no spectacle. A gesture the house would know. If you ever think I've lost my way, read this letter quietly. It doesn't matter where. The voice turns wind into a message. I recognize it. I'll come back. Here, the text approached the miracle itself, being read softly so that someone would return. Not as a vision, but as an effect of care. I'm scared, but he's become small. Fear has become the size of a spoon. You can carry it in your pocket and forget about it for hours. What occupies me now is the list of names I can still pronounce clearly. You, the house, the dog, the yard, the smell of bread, the word window, and the sound the cup makes when it meets wood. This list was a declaration of ownership. His world, still his, fit into an inventory of simple things. I wanted to copy each item so I wouldn't forget how to do it. If you ever come here, I don't know when, I don't know how, don't bring flowers, bring bread, bring a mug, bring a ribbon. And if you can, bring the word tomorrow written on a piece of paper. Leave it somewhere where the wind will find it. The final request didn't raise a monument. It raised a table again. Bread, a mug, a ribbon, a piece of paper. Everything that fits in one hand. The following lines thinned, like slowly falling snow. There were longer gaps between. Sentences, as if the soldier were blowing out a candle between each paragraph. The city is not what I see, Mother. That's what I remember. And what I remember still fits here. A pause. Then, if I don't come back, it's not because I left. It's because I stayed where the water touches the shore. The page ended with a square drawn in pencil. Nothing inside, just the outline. Below, a short word, window. The third curve of the return map rested before me, soundless. Window, a place to see the river, a place to open the house, a place to let the wind pass through. I understood why tomorrow was left hanging, to be placed in this frame by the reader whenever they wanted. Tomorrow in the window, like a message to themselves. I stared at the empty square for a long time. I realized the letter didn't need a reply. I already had the house, the bread, the window. All that was missing was the simple gesture of opening it. I flung open the living room window, and the air rushed in with a cold fringe that hit the papers and made the edges sing softly. In the thin sound, I heard the same frequency he spoke of when he mentioned the ice. It wasn't grand. It was small and sufficient. I placed the fragment tomorrow inside the drawn square, just for a moment without gluing it. I left it there as if the word were resting in the frame. The house, there, was complete. An open window, a wind that knows the way, a tomorrow that doesn't weigh heavy, a letter that doesn't demand mourning, but companionship. I gathered the 3 sheets together with strips of neutral paper, without forcing the folds, and slid them back into the envelope. On the inside flap, the phrase, "You will see the river 3 times before you sleep," now seemed less of an enigma and more of a reminder. I myself, without planning, had seen the river in the morning, in the middle, at dusk. I slept better on the days I did this. The letter worked as promised, a brief guide for getting through a winter. I turned off all the lights except the one on the table. The envelope remained like a small island of light in the darkness. I sat down and rested my fingers on the grain of the paper, feeling the relief of the writing behind it. Inside, someone was still saying "mother" with chattering teeth from the cold, yet still finding the sweetness of the word. Inside, someone was choosing bread, a house, a window tomorrow, and learning to say goodbye without hiding. I got up slowly, in no rush to leave that small land of silence. Before putting it away, I took out my notebook and wrote down what I understood, with the same economy the letter taught me. 3 curves, house, bread, window. 3 visions, morning, middle, fall. 3 gestures, open, listen, collect. Tomorrow. I closed the notebook. In the window pane, a reflection of the room gave me back a simple image. Table, envelope, map, mug. It was like a painting without an artist. I leaned my forehead against the glass and let the cold air sharpen my thoughts. I knew, as if someone were telling me from the other side, that the job wasn't to finish it. It was to save it properly. Save it in a way that anyone could open it, and upon opening it, find the same breath. I placed the letter in the center of the folder, arranged the photographs beside it, closed it with a fabric elastic band, and wrote on the cover, in very small print, the title he himself had chosen. It's still the same winter. Below, the short word that served as a password, tomorrow. I left the briefcase on the table and went to the window again, purely on reflex. The wind blew in and made a noise that sounded like someone coming down the hall. It wasn't anyone. It was just the house relearning how to breathe. And I finally breathed along unhurriedly. There was only one thing left, to take the letter to the bend in the river and look at it 3 times before picking it up. I hadn't done it right yet. I would, and when I did, I would know where to place the word. Tomorrow, so it would shine without attracting attention. The window was already open, the path was drawn, the envelope was intact, and on the other side, someone was still calling Mom, in the same tone the wind calls through the house.